Welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the place where you can learn how to create a dental practice and a business life that you love. Listen in with Dr. David Moffet as he interviews successful entrepreneurs and successful business people and successful dentists as they share their business successes, their stories, and their breakthrough ideas. Sharing pearls of wisdom that you can take back to your practice and implement immediately so that you can have that great practice with more patients, higher profits, and less stress. This is the podcast where great dental practices meet with successful business processes. Thanks for tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the podcast where thought leaders, industry experts, and thriving practice owners reveal their very best tips, tools, and strategies that will help you to grow your dental practice faster. Now, here's your host, Dr. David Moffet.
Hello and welcome to today's episode, the first episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. I'm Dr. David Moffet, and today my guest is Chris Barrow, who, for those of you who know him, know that he is probably the number one practice management guru in the United Kingdom, and he's the person who everybody turns to for sage advice in terms of running their dental practice. And it is my honour to welcome Chris Barrow to the microphone. Chris, good morning to you. Good afternoon to me. How are you?
Very good morning, David. I am very well, thank you very much indeed. Yes, it is 6:30 in the morning here in the northwest of England, and what a fantastic way to start a week. It's Monday morning that we're recording this, and my very first work assignment of the week is to meet with you here and have a chat, and well, that's a way of hitting the ground running, isn't it?
Well, Chris, I appreciate you taking the time early in the morning, and I know you're a morning person and you've got exercise and things to do, so definitely appreciate you taking that time to speak with me this morning on this starting journey for me in terms of being a podcaster. It has been a little while coming, but it has been expected. Chris, dental practice in the UK and dental practice in Australia, in fact, dental practice in the English-speaking world, I've found is pretty much the same 90% of the time. What are you seeing in the UK at this point in time? Coming out of COVID, what's happening there to private practice dentistry, the national health, and how dental practice, the supply and demand for dentistry?
Sure. Well, I think I'm going to preface my comments by saying that there's probably an 80-20 rule in the sense that 80% of it I think is good news, and probably 20% of it could be interpreted as bad news. But I really want to start my comments by reassuring, I suppose, the audience that this isn't going to be some kind of whinge fest about how difficult life is in the business of dentistry. Of course, like any other business, it has its challenges, which I'll refer to in a moment. But overall, I'm very optimistic about the UK dental landscape. And in fact, I'm equally optimistic about the international dental landscape for anybody who's listening to this outside of the United Kingdom. And I'll explain why that is. So let's get the reasons to be miserable out of the way, shall we? And just acknowledge the fact that what has happened in the United Kingdom since lockdown, since COVID, is that, interestingly, after the initial lockdown period, what we discovered over here was that the demand for dental treatment was very, very high indeed. And I would argue that many of my clients enjoyed almost a kind of a boom period from the second half of 2020 through to a couple of years ago. And without getting too deep into the politics and the economics, we do have a terminology that we've adopted over here, which is called Trussonomics. And Trussonomics is what happened when Liz Truss became the very, very temporary Prime Minister over here and introduced a set of economic policies, which I think even the most die-hard conservative would agree with the phrase crashed the economy, which has been used widely by the media. And the result of crashing the economy is that we've just had a 2.5 year period where we've had a significant cost of living crisis over here in the UK after years and years and years of inflation running at 1%, 2%, 3% on a bad day. We suddenly found ourselves looking at 11% inflation for a period of time. And that has impacted the UK dental landscape. First of all, because patients themselves have become a little bit more cautious about spending money, as has everybody. But secondly, also, and I think more importantly, what we've seen over here is some very, very significant wage demands that have been made by dental team members and also by clinicians over here. To give you an example of that, David, for the first, I'm 30 years into dentistry, and for 28 of those years, pretty consistently, key performance indicator for payroll costs as a percentage of turnover ran at about 17.5%. So if you had $1 million dental practice, you would expect your payroll cost to be about $175,000 a year. And that key performance indicator was one of the most robust. It stayed the same forever and ever. What we're seeing over here in the UK at the moment is that over the last 2.5 years, that's rising. Currently across my client base, probably about 25%. So that $175,000 payroll cost is now a $250,000 payroll cost. And in many cases, that's come off the bottom line of the business because quite often the dental practice owners haven't been brave enough to pass that increase in costs on to the consumer because they've been mindful of the fact that the consumer has been under financial pressure as well. So you roll all of that out, and what you have is diminishing profit margins, and certainly we've seen evidence of that in the last couple of years. So that's reason to be miserable, number one. The operating costs within dentistry have climbed very, very sharply over the last couple of years. Reason to be miserable, number two, is that we are suffering from what we call over here a recruitment and retention crisis. It's becoming very difficult to recruit new team members and new clinicians, largely because either people don't want to work in dentistry because they don't see it as being an attractive landscape to be employed, or we simply don't have enough clinicians in the United Kingdom because not enough people are qualifying. And since that magnificent British-owned goal called Brexit, we haven't had the supply of overseas dentists in order to fill the gaps in the dental workforce. Although that's about to change, and I'll make reference to that in a minute when we start talking about the future. So I would say the bad news is, number one, let's summarize reasons to be miserable. Reason to be miserable, number one, significantly increased operating costs and payroll costs, which have diminished profits. Reason to be miserable, number two, very, very difficult to hire people, and also very, very difficult to keep those people. They are being poached. There's a lot of headhunting going on. There's a lot of people moving from point A to point B for a few dollars or a few pounds extra a month because they themselves have got cost of living issues at home as well. So that's the miserable end. Should we get on with the positive stuff, David?
Well, I'll just say this, Chris, that those are things that we've seen in Australia and we've seen in the US as well. You know, the low inflation then followed by the higher inflation, pushing up the cost of living, and therefore the cost of wages follows that. You know, the base wage has to go up, and therefore you have to match that. And then secondly, the supply in the UK, obviously Brexit shrunk the supply of overseas dentists in Australia because of COVID. We just weren't getting the overseas dentists being allowed to come into the country because of the immigration of keeping COVID out. And so that's delayed the the approval of those extra, the top end dental manpower. I don't know if you're aware, but in Australia, traditionally, dentists graduate in India and don't even pick up a drill in India. They just jump on a plane, come to Australia and sit their exams, and those people are missing. That being said, we've still got plenty of dentists down here, probably an oversupply of dentists, but it is causing similar issues. So our problems are similar globally. What's the good news happening in the UK?
So let's talk about the good news. You started off this podcast by saying that there are so many similarities between the dental landscape in different countries, and like you, I've had the opportunity to do some work internationally, and like you, I've seen those similarities. And I always like to reference the fact that what essentially we're doing here, and predictably provocative is what I'm going to say next. But what we're doing here is we're dealing with people that have got teeth, gums, and wallets. And so long as we've got people with teeth, gums, and wallets, and so long as those people have a desire to maintain their long-term oral health, but also so long as those people have a desire to keep their teeth and gums for as long as they possibly can in their life, then there's always going to be a marketplace, and that remains the case. And whether you look at my demographic, baby boomers, that's people born between 1947 and 1957. I'm right in the middle of that. I was born in 1953, and one of the things that I know about us baby boomers, and I do believe that the situation is pretty much the same in Australia, United States. Us baby boomers control a disproportionate amount of the net disposable income and capital in our relative nations. In other words, we are generally speaking, we're an affluent group. Generally speaking, we are empty nesters. Generally speaking, we've paid off mortgages, we've finished school fees, we're enjoying the fruits of our labour. But perhaps most importantly of all, generally speaking, we are living perhaps 25 years longer than our parents did. My father sadly passed away when he was 73 years old. My grandfather passed away when he was 72 years old. I'll be 71 years old in September, but I am still doing long distance cycling. I'm still training for marathons. I'm still very active, and of course I'm equally active at work as I am at play. And notwithstanding unforeseen illness and accident, it is my intention to carry on both working and playing for a very, very good period of time yet. And people like me want to look good and feel good. And people like me, fortunately, have got increasingly complex solutions to our long-term dental problems. So that's a fantastic market. And from that market, we cascade down into those baby boomers' children. And then we cascade down into those baby boomers' grandchildren, all of whom are going to inherit the wealth that we've created. And therefore, I see us being very, very busy for a very, very long time to come. So my first reason to be cheerful is that demographics works in favour of dentistry. My second reason to be cheerful is the simply bewildering choices of treatment modalities that we have available to us. When I first came into dentistry in the mid-1990s, early to mid-90s, the product list in a dental practice was fairly restricted. Nowadays, the products and service list in a dental practice is huge. So we've got, to put it bluntly and from a business perspective, we've got more problems to solve, but we've also got more solutions to sell. So that's a fantastic business opportunity. And my third reason to be cheerful is, and I'm going to use the D word for digital, I'm going to talk about the technology that is appearing within dentistry, with particular reference, and let's just underline the fact here, David, that I'm not a dentist. So I can't get into a particularly clinical conversation. But what I can do after 30 years of working with dentists is that I can say that the arrival of the intraoral scanner into dentistry and the arrival of the software and the artificial intelligence, which is beginning now to flourish around the intraoral scanner as a means of patient education, patient communication, is absolutely astonishing. And I've been very fortunate to be able to get involved with the development of the intraoral scanning landscape over here in the United Kingdom, because I've been hosting webinars for 3 years now on that subject. And I've been listening to speakers from all over the world talk about how they use intraoral scanning as part of their business and professional life. And I am absolutely thrilled and excited about the possibilities that gives us all to educate patients even further as to how we can help them. So great news on demographics, great news on product mix, great news on technology, and the fantastic news that there is absolutely no reason why that cannot continue. And I've got 5 adult children, sadly, none of whom have chosen to move into either healthcare or dentistry. But you know what? If I had a kid spare, and if that kid came to me and said, Dad, what do you think about a career in dentistry? I would say, get in there, kiddo, because I think it's a fantastic place to be.
Wow, that's a big endorsement. Chris, with the scanners, and they're all the rage. You know, I retired 7 years ago from clinical dentistry, and so I've experienced a scanner as a patient, but I never experienced one in those days pre-2017 as a user. But from what I've seen, they are the next step forward in that they are a digital record of exactly what happened without having to pour up models, without having to take photographs. It's all there, can be on a computer screen as things are prepped, as things are restored, as things change. And that's really great. What I saw earlier this year at the Australian Dental Trade Expo in March was the use of AI now as being a judge in terms of you need a restoration. Now it's not one dentist's opinion versus another. It's, well, let's see what the AI expert says about this tooth and whether it needs restoring. And to me, the patient can't argue or discuss whether or not they go ahead because the computer has told them that this is what is now needed. Are you seeing that the use of that more in dentistry in the UK?
Yes, I am, and I think that there's an important distinction here, which is that I believe that the users of intraoral scanners fall into 2 camps. The first camp are the people who see it as nothing particularly much more than a replacement for impression material. That's it. And isn't it great that we just don't have to shove all that gunk into your mouth anymore? I'm just going to scan your teeth really quickly, and I will then go off in my corner, and I will look at the scan, and I will decide what it is that is going to happen next. And that's camp 1, and they're not really making very much progress as far as intraoral scanning is concerned. Camp 2, of course, are the people who are first of all, and it's been really interesting to see these people. First of all, what they're doing is that they're explaining that there's a communication with the patient as to what the scanner is. There's a communication with the patient as they are scanning. The first camp, by the way, will very often scan the patient in silence. So the patient's just sat there with their mouth open with a scanner in the mouth. and listening to all the funny noises that are going on around it. And then the dentist is just there scanning, maybe just exchanging some unintelligible dialogue with a nurse assistant. Whereas the second camp are actually talking the patient through every single part of the scan. What I'm doing now is, what I'm doing now is, what I'm doing now is. And they are letting the patient see the scan begin to emerge on the screen, which is in front of the patient. And then when the scan is complete, the second camp of dentists are actually then obviously moving the image around on the computer screen. But there's a moment of magic, which is when the patient leans up out of the chair and reaches over, and the patient says, is it okay if I touch the screen? And they start to move their own image around on the screen. And then the patient says, well, what's this here? And that's the moment of magic where the patient has become completely engaged in the process. The patient now is not at the other end of a telescope. The patient is dancing in step, in harmony with either a treatment coordinator who has taken a scan as part of a new patient assessment, or alternatively, the patient is dancing with the dentist or dental therapist or dental hygienist, and has become completely engaged, has become a complete partner in the diagnostic process. And that's where the magic happens. And of course, just think about what's happened here, that we've gone from a dentist putting a mirror the size of a coin inside your mouth and then telling you what they can see one tooth at a time, to a patient sitting in a chair and literally reaching over and manipulating a computer screen themselves in order to move their own image around and becoming part of that discussion process. That's a quantum change in patient education. And what we're seeing over and over again is that those clinicians and treatment coordinators who are able to engage the patient in that process and in that way, number one, new patient conversion statistics are up. Number two, treatment plan values are up. Number three, treatment plan conversion statistics are up. And perhaps most significantly of all, number four, the patient's willingness to become involved in their own long-term care is up. Because what's happening is that if a scan is being taken at every dental health review, and if as a result of that, the clinician are able to show the patient either the progress or regression in their oral health, then the patient has now become engaged in their own oral health to an extent that we've never seen before. They own it.
Really, really important thing that you're mentioning there, Chris, because it truly is. It's like it's that old adage, there's those who dream of what's going to happen. There's those who actually do what's going to happen. And there's those who do nothing and go, gee, what happened? And I can see from what you've said, there's going to be a big chunk of the profession who go, oh, the train's left the station and it's gone. And I should have been on that train. Yeah. And that's what you're saying there. It's more than just replacing, polyvinyl impressions and alginate impressions now. This is about seeing your mouth and seeing it there, and in combination with some really good quality intraoral photography as well. Patients will have that whole. They'll be in their mouth. It'll be a virtual walk inside their own mouth and inside their own health.
That's it.
Tell me, we've mentioned briefly AI. One of the things that I'm seeing down here, and I'm also seeing it in the US, because of the manpower issue that you discussed earlier, is that there's dental practices now that are now going to virtual staffing in terms of virtual office staff, virtual reception staff. I've got a good friend in the US who runs a business out of Zimbabwe, servicing dental practices in the US with virtual receptionists who process everything. They're there Just sit in front of the screen and deal with the person. It's kind of like Charlie's Angels, deal with the person on the other side of the screen. In Australia, it's starting to happen as well. The replacement of dental staff, not because there's less of them, I don't think, but I think that what's happening is that they're not doing the things that they used to have to do, and so they're offshoring some duties which probably should never be duties in the first place, like reactivation. If you've got good follow up, you don't have to reactivate, do you? But what are you seeing in the UK in terms of virtual assistants? Is that becoming an option because of the manpower issue?
It's definitely there, but it's only just emerging. Only just. So if we look at the adoption cycle, I would say that we're still in the innovation phase. And when you read about the adoption cycle, you've got what they call the gap between the innovation stage and the early adoption stage. And what happens there is that the innovators try and fail until they come up with a formula that works. And then hopefully it bridges the gap into the early adoption stage and people start to then use it. So I would say that when I look at AI in British dentistry, it really is still in the innovation stage. But there is no doubt that there are people in the marketplace at the moment that are, for example, promoting new practice management software, which, it used to, a few years ago, it used to be sexy that you said that your practice management software was based in the cloud. And everybody went, oh my God, that's amazing. And nowadays, of course, that's just de rigueur, but what's now happening is that there are people saying, hey, we've got a new practice management software system. And by the way, it's got a virtual receptionist system, or it's got a virtual new patient inquiry system where AI is being brought into the mix. Early days. Now, it's really interesting. I was down at one of the British dental conferences in the back end of May, and I took part in a panel discussion, and it was around the future of AI in dentistry. And it was really interesting that I would say that the body of the Kirk was probably feeling very unsettled by the arrival of AI in dentistry, and oh my God, what's it going to do to jobs, and what's it going to do to customer service, and what's it going to do to this, that, and the other. And then there was a minority, which I have to say I was in the minority here, saying, listen, this is inevitable. It is the development of the microchip. It is the unstoppable development of technology. And there is absolutely no doubt whatsoever that as AI gradually evolves within the dental landscape and within the world, that it will replace people in some of the functions that they have. So yes, we started off a while back talking about payroll costs having gone up 40% in the last 2.5 years in the UK, and the impact that's having on profit margins. Well, we're now going to see the reverse effect, which is that AI is going to reduce the need for people. And there are those that get terribly emotional about that. Oh, you cannot replace people with machines, and we cannot take the passion out of dentistry by taking the people out of dentistry. I agree with all of those things. We do need people with passion in order to make any business work. I absolutely get that. But, you can't turn around and say, why do we need motor cars? There's nothing wrong with horses. You can't turn round and say, why do we need television? There's nothing wrong with the radio. These are inexorable, unstoppable progresses in human society, good or bad. There are those that would probably argue that the motor car in the long term has been a bad thing because there was nothing wrong with horses and they didn't create as much mess. But we don't live in a world where people are riding around on horses. We live in a world where people are driving around in cars. It is what it is. We need to deal with it. So it's the thin end of a much thicker wedge, and the only difference is that it might have taken a few decades for the motor car to replace the horse. It might have taken less than a decade for the television to replace the radio. And I think that AI is going to be replacing people a lot faster than we perhaps imagine.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's difficult to see the future, even though, and usually we can look at another industry and say, well, if it's done that in that industry, then it's going to do that in dentistry. I still marvel at the the way general surgeons are operating now with computerized technology and robots. I still can't work out how we get a human head into with a tooth in it into the computer scene that we can then operate. There still has to be that human feel. People still have to close their mouth and breathe and swallow, and it does create a little bit of difficulty in that sort of situation. I'm sure it's going to come. I'm sure it is going to come, though. But when it comes, we've got to be, as we've said, we've got to be at the crest of the wave. We've not got to be behind the wave. We've got to make sure that we're there and we're on top of the curve.
I'll tell you something, David. I probably, like many other people, was absolutely blown away. It was only a couple of weeks ago when I saw the promotional video for the new Apple Vision Pro headset. You know, the VR headset that they started selling. Now, I have to say, I got terribly excited until I saw the price tag, and then retreated rapidly. Because I still think that I'm not going to be investing £3,500 in a VR headset. But what it did get me thinking, obviously, I saw the Apple promotional video where, they were talking about having your desktop floating in the air in front of you, being able to move things around just by pinching your fingers and all the rest of it. And it's obviously super cool. But it did. The first thought that came into my mind was how long before a clinician in a dental practice is actually sitting with a virtual headset on like that and is looking in 360 degrees around a patient's mouth. Probably, imagery that's on the end of a scanner, which is being portrayed for that clinician in the space in front of them. And how long before they're doing diagnostics without possibly even being in the same building as the patient. Now, of course, it's another leap of faith to then say how long before they're actually delivering clinical dentistry without being in the same building as the patient. But it does make you think, doesn't it, that if Apple can turn that kind of technology out to sell on the high street, how long before the word virtual becomes embedded in pretty much everything that we do?
Chris, 10 years ago, we didn't think there was ever going to be a replacement for a taxi cab, did we? Now look at what we've got. Anything is possible. Let's get back to the landscape of dental practice ownership in the UK. Down here in Australia, we're graduating more female dentists than male dentists. Traditionally, female dentists still want to be mothers and parents. And so practice ownership, as we knew it back 30 years ago, is not a male-dominated arena anymore. Are you seeing that sort of trend in the UK?
No doubt whatsoever. And as you know, David, I work very closely with a community of around about 100 dental businesses that range in size from one woman, one man band up to small micro corporates, 11 locations, 20 locations. So I'm kind of all over the map in terms of that landscape. First things first, I've always had a fairly high proportion of female business owners within my client base. And I see that proportion increasing as each year goes by. There is no doubt about that whatsoever. And in fact, I was. It seems incredible now that nearly 7 or 8 years ago, I actually started writing a series of blog posts about the unique characteristics of female dental business owners and the challenges that they have to face as they try to match their professional and personal life. That series of blog posts was then added to by some of the female principals I was working with at that time. So it was a chapter by me, a chapter by them, a chapter by me, a chapter by them. And we ended up turning it into a little ebook, which is called The Female Principle. And, as I said earlier on, it's about 7 or 8 years old now and probably needs a rewrite. But some of the observations that we made way back then are still true today. As I said earlier on, it is a characteristic of the female practice owner that they have a more sensitive balance between their personal and their professional life. They probably take on more responsibility than male practice owners, and certainly having spent endless hours in communication with them, I understand the challenges that they face. So that's very true. So we're seeing that change in the landscape. And I think the other primary change that we're seeing over here, and I know it's matched in other countries, is that we've had a period of time, it's actually 20 years now, that dental corporates, dental groups have been growing and growing and growing and growing. It's interesting, when I first came into this landscape, there were probably something in the region of about 13,000 independently owned practices in the UK, and most of them, of course, relatively small businesses. That number is now down to about 8,000 according to the latest stats. So we've seen the independent ownership market shrink by a third because a lot of those independents have gone into corporate and dental group ownership. They've sold out to the big boys. However, in the current economic climate, those larger dental groups are doing a lot of navel gazing at the moment because their operating costs have gone up, because their appetite for clinicians has gone up, because their need for payroll, for people, I should say, for team members has gone up. And of course, they're suffering to a greater degree in this current economic cycle than the smaller independent. So the dental groups have gone pretty quiet. And, the word on the street is that there's a lot of cost cutting. There's a lot of inward facing activity that's going on. And we've not even touched on the National Health Service yet. But we do have a newly elected Labour administration here in the United Kingdom who have officially announced that the NHS is broken and that they intend to fix it. Well, we'll see how that goes. But there is no doubt whatsoever that NHS dentistry is broken. And the British Dental Association and many other people are screaming for change in a system which just isn't fulfilling its objectives because it's underfunded. But we're all pretty confident that there's no new money. So all that you're really doing is just moving the pieces around the board, and it remains to be seen what's going to happen. And by the way, as an aside, the clinical staff shortages in the NHS system in the UK are officially going to be solved by importing dentists from India. And in fact, the NHS England have done, or the Department of Health have done a deal with the South Indian government in Kerala in order to import Indian dentists and Indian dental care professionals into the UK market in order to try and fill some of the gaps in the NHS system. But where I'm heading with all of that, and sorry about the ramble, is that I believe that the smaller independent practice owner is very, very well placed at the moment Because as far as the UK is concerned, at one end of the spectrum, we've got an NHS system that's broken, and the term dental desert has now been coined by the media to describe those very, very large areas of the United Kingdom where actually NHS dentistry is simply not available. There are no vacancies or no practices that are offering it. So one end we've got dental deserts. You can't get in to see an NHS dentist. And at the other end, we've got the big dental groups and corporates navel gazing and cost cutting. And so I think that we've got an opportunity here in the middle for the smaller, independent, owner-managed, family-based dental practice to get out there and to offer a level of service that cannot be offered by the people at either end of that spectrum. So I'm extremely optimistic about the future prospects for my owner-managed clients. I think that we're going to be enjoying a bit of a golden period.
Chris, you solved the problem there straight away, and you led us back to it. The fact is that when you provide us a great level of service to a customer in any business, there will be people who will choose that business based on the service, irrespective of the price, as long as they feel that they're getting good value for their dollar. They might not care that they're paying a little bit more. They're happy with what they're getting. And the classic example, of course, is the person who cleans your pool, the person who mows your lawn, the person who does your nails, the person who does your hair. You build a relationship with that person. They turn up, they're regular, they do a great job, you're happy with it. You don't care whether the guy over the road is paying £5 less for his lawn to be mowed, and you don't care whether your wife's hairdresser is charging £10 more than somewhere down the road. There's that relationship. And that's what we always have in dentistry. It's still a person-to-person business for 20 to 25% of the population. Now that
Yep.
percentage of the population may not be the same percentage that care about the price of their nails or their pool or their lawns, but in dentistry it does matter, that service. And so that's one of the fundamentals of maintaining a successful business in dentistry, is that there will always be people who will want that personalized service. Do you see any other big fundamentals? Obviously technology and being seen to be at the forefront of technology is a big bonus in dentistry, in the service of dentistry. Anything else that we've missed out on discussing today?
In fairness, I'm not entirely sure there is. There's an interesting contradiction, because not very many minutes ago we were talking about the role of technology and AI in dentistry, which is actually reducing the need to employ team members over the long term. But that doesn't mean no people. It just means fewer people doing smarter things. And what AI, you've made the point yourself, David, that you could create an AI-driven robot that would clean your pool, but it ain't going to sit and have a coffee with you and talk to you about the football results. And that's where the customer service aspect comes in. That's where the personal relationship comes in. So what we've got is this really, really interesting moment in dental business history, where what we're all trying to do, those of us that are at the right end of the adoption cycle, what we're trying to do is to say, how do we combine technology with personal relationships? It's technology and relationships that go together. And those relationships are relationships with our patients, relationships with our team members, and relationships with our clinicians as well. So a long time ago, somebody said that leadership and management are two different things. Managers manage systems and leaders lead people. And the systems in dentistry are getting more and more clever over time. And we're going to need people who can manage those systems. But the leadership of people, the leadership of patients, of team members, of clinicians will never, ever be replaced by machine learning. And so we need leaders, not just in our political landscape, for goodness sake, but we also need leaders in our businesses. We need leaders in our communities. And somebody once said that everybody's a coach, and I believe that to be true. We're all coaches because we're all coaching someone, whether it's our children, whether it's our spouse, whether it's our employees, whether it's our neighbours, whether it's our patients. We're all coaching. And those coaching skills and leadership skills will never, ever be replaced by technology. We need both. Have we missed anything?
Probably.
Don't think so.
Well, if we have, I'm sure we're going to find out first, because we're at the forefront, aren't we, in terms of what we're seeing and being ahead of the curve and keeping up with the technologies and keeping up with the trends in dentistry, just by the fact that we're across so many practices. And this is something that I tell my clients and my prospective clients. You can Google stuff, but once you're in your own silo, you don't even know what the dentist next door is really doing. And that's where a coach is so valuable, because a coach knows what's working and will tell you, that I haven't seen that work in other practices. I don't know why you're trying that. A coach is there to help you, to keep you on the straight line and remove the distractions that get you away from your end result. And that is, you're running a successful practice and enjoying the benefits of being a successful business owner, both in providing a great service to your customers, but also being rewarded, financially for the risk and the effort in getting to where you were in dentistry.
I'm rather uplifted, I think is the word I'm looking for. I am uplifted by the fact that one of the trends that I've noticed here in the last 6 months is that I very often will get somebody drop me a message and say, "Hey, Chris, I've been following your blog, your podcast, your newsletter articles, all the rest of it for a while now. And I just wonder if you could help me with this thing." And what I'm seeing is an upturn in the number of younger dentists who are contacting me and saying, "Hey, I'm interested in getting onto the ownership ladder. I don't really know what I'm talking about in terms of, should I buy a practice? Should I open a practice? What's it all about? I've got an itch. I need to scratch it, but I don't know which way's up. And so I want you as a business coach to come along and give me some guidance." Now, it's always nice when that happens. It's been pretty quiet on that front in recent years. I think people have either been too busy, too distracted, or maybe too scared to look at ownership. But this year, I'm beginning to see here in the UK a noticeable upturn in the number of those new owner enquiries coming through. So that gives me a great deal of hope and optimism about the fact that maybe people are getting an appetite to say, "Oh my God, this marketplace is a place that I would like to get involved in as an owner and really see how far I can go with it." That's great news, isn't it?
It is. I'm seeing it down here. I'm seeing it in pharmacy. I've got a friend who has a number of pharmacies, and he encourages new graduates to buy in a sequential manner over a period of 5 to 10 years, where he still maintains a small share at the end, so they're still under that one umbrella, but they develop those processes and they are now pharmacy owners. And I can see something like that working in dentistry as well, without it having to be selling out to a corporate where you get no ownership, or a 50-50. And, I can see a majority ownership for the associate over time and just nurture them into the business. So anything's possible in dentistry. I think, a patient once said to me nearly 40 years ago, he said, "Dentistry is the last bastion of free enterprise." And I still believe that to be true today, because it really is the definition of a cottage industry, isn't it? As long as you work it as a business, It can be as big or as small or as niched as you want it to be. You own a bakery, you got to bake 7 days a week. Nobody's going to say, oh, the baker's only open on Tuesday. You're out of business. But dentistry, people can wait. You're there 2 days a week. They love you. They'll wait for you for those 2 days. It's how it is. Chris, it's been great talking to you. I know that you've got a busy schedule for today, so I appreciate your time. And Chris, if anybody's watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, how can they get in touch with you?
Oh, that's easy enough. Just go to the website. It is easy to remember because it's www.coachbarrow, CoachBarrow.com. And if you want to go there, have a look around, see what I'm up to. But you can also see that I write a blog 5 days a week, and I publish a newsletter once a month. And I do also co-host a couple of podcasts over here as well, which you can find on the Apple podcast platform. And so, David, I wish you every success with this podcast venture of yours. It's something that I've been involved in for quite a few years. It's huge fun. And I do know, and I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that your audience will grow and grow and grow and grow as people realize that this is a great way to commute or walk the dog or ride the bike and listen to what people have got to say about this amazing place that we all occupy called dentistry. So thank you for having me.
Chris, as always, it's been a pleasure catching up. And as I said before we came on air, look, we'll definitely get together face-to-face next year for sure. So, Chris Barrow, thanks for being on the Ultimate Dental Podcast today.
Thank you, David.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you for being part of our dental community and joining us each week on this incredible journey. If you found value in today's episode and you don't want to miss out on future episodes packed with expert insights and actionable strategies, here's how you can stay connected with us. Firstly, hit that subscribe button. Whether you're listening on your favourite podcast platform or watching on our website, subscribing ensures you'll never miss an episode. Secondly, share the love. If you know a fellow dentist or colleague who could benefit from the wisdom and knowledge that we share here, please share our podcast with them. Also, please share the podcast on your socials by simply clicking on the social icons wherever you view or listen to this podcast. Together, we can all do our bit to elevate the dental profession. And finally, stay engaged with us. We love hearing from you. Your questions, comments, and feedback fuel our mission to provide the best content for your professional growth, your personal growth, and for your practice growth. Remember, your journey to creating a dental practice and a business life that you love is our mission, and we're excited to be your trusted guide along the way. Thank you for being a part of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Until next time, keep smiling, keep striving, and keep on tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast.